Welcome to Redeemer Online, wherever you are. My name is Joe Hamilton, and I'm a pastor serving here in Sarnia, Ontario, and to many of you through Redeemer Online. It's my privilege to bring you this message, not only because it's the end of our series on Psalm 23, and you've been participating in this for 6 weeks now, if you count today, but it's also a privilege because it's Easter weekend, and I get to be the one who says on behalf of Corey Van Heusen, our lead pastor of Redeemer Online, and myself, a blessed Easter to each of you. Not just in the sense of family time and reconnecting and being with others around you, but also a blessed Easter in the sense like here is where the hope and our joy in faith comes to a head. This is the moment in which we see the concrete sort of evidence of new life, not just for us in our day-to-day, but in the scope of eternity as well. And so we want to wish you a blessed Easter as you are encouraged, hopefully then, in life and in faith. Remember, as we move forward, we're going to see a shift in focus on preaching voice from mine to Corey's, and that together we will work to provide content to you through Redeemer Online. You also need to remember that Corey is going to be trying to work hard to connect with you in the weeks ahead. And so I strongly encourage you to do even more than what you did with me and find ways to connect with Corey and take that time to learn each other's stories and to learn to support each other in the places that you are. Again, we're wanting to equip you to be serving and living as a witness in the communities that you're a part of with the friends and the families and the neighbors that you already have. For you are Christ's light in this world of darkness. You're his resurrection hope in a story where we so often are overwhelmed by the prospects of death. May God bless you today as you hear today's message and go into the week ahead. Let me share with you one last time Psalm 23, verses 1 to 6. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23 is a psalm for the living. It frames for us the person of God as he interacts with us throughout our lives. It's not a theological psalm in the sense that it creates this long, difficult to understand explanation of who God is and how he relates to us, but presents us instead with a couple of really simple pictures of a good shepherd and a gracious host. And the goodness of the shepherd is revealed in part here by his willingness to journey with and to pursue and to follow those that are lost, even in the darkest valleys, to go with them through those places, to never abandon them or forsake them or leave them. With Good Friday behind us and the realities of the resurrection of Christ on Easter in front of us, it's much easier to see in the fullness what God has revealed in part here, that our good shepherd would indeed lay his life down for our sake so that we might live with him. We see the goodness of God's love in the generosity of his hosting. That it's not just an abundance that he offers in protection and care for his people, but it is even extended to those who are his enemies. That he, instead of destroying them, would give them a place to sit in his presence, to taste and see his goodness. And so I would contend that what we read here in Psalm 23 is what Mark was speaking about in chapter 6, verse 34 of his gospel. When we see what the Son, the kindness and the love of the Son as being the same as what was done and expressed by the Father. That like the Father has compassion on sheep without a shepherd, so too does the Son. You could summarize this entire psalm and really the entire person of God in just one word: hesed, love. Kindness, mercy also means loyalty, faithfulness, covenantal love, unconditional love. We said faithfulness. There's a long list of the options that you can choose when defining this one word, because we see in so many different ways God revealing his love to his people throughout history, and every time we see that expression of love, it looks and feels a little bit different and deeper and more nuanced than it was before. His care is so complete and so full that it's hard to define in just one word. The series for us then has been in many ways inviting you to not just know God as he reveals himself through Psalm 23, to know him as your good shepherd and to know him as your gracious host, but also to know that the characteristic of God, that is the person of love that he is also for you. To know that the love he has for the world is for you, and for you to learn to trust him in that. There's an implicit challenge here in the psalm as we read it, and it's presented really in that first line, as we said, right? That the Lord is my shepherd, and I lack nothing. And I contend that if those words fall out of your mouth, but you have in your mind all these different needs that you're lacking in, then I would argue that your trust in God has room to grow. I know for myself that's a daily task. And thankfully, as the final verse of this psalm suggests, it's actually not only up to us that we grow in that trusting and knowing God. That his goodness and his love actually pursues us, follows us, but better pursues. That he is actively following us and chasing us down and ensuring that we know his love, his care, and his protection. In many ways, this final verse in Psalm 23 invites us not to just know God as he has been revealed or to know him in his love, but it really invites us to join him, to do life with him. His goodness and his love is already following you, already pursuing you, so don't run from it, accept it, and do life with him. What does that mean? Well, for me, that means that when I pick my head up in the morning and my brain begins to populate a long list or an agenda for the day, it means that when you hit those moments where you know that you're going to need a little extra help, that you know that God is with you, and you can say in the quietness of your mind and heart, Lord, Article 8.6 needs a little extra attention from you today. I'm not sure I can do that on my own. It means that you have the assurance that as you go through life and contend with all of the very specific needs that are before you, that God also is very attentive to those specific needs for you too. And so you are invited to, by his will, to share in that with him. For his goodness and his love follows you all the days of your life. For the length of the day. For the duration of the days. Day in and day out, in another way of saying it. God is with you and attentive to you. In another psalm, Psalm 3, it's one of my favorite sort of references to how God meets us in the mundane, but it says in the context of David's extraordinary strife, because again, he finds himself surrounded by enemies, but he starts by affirming that God is his protection, but then lists the way that God cares for him. And get this. He says, credit to God goes to him lifting up his head high, so that in a moment when he feels overwhelmed and repressed by the pressure around him, it's God who gives him the strength to hold his head high. Even better, it's God who helps him to lay his head down at night. And it's God who helps him to pick his head up in the morning. That even the act of going to bed and waking in the morning and making it through the day with your head lifted up rather than being dissolved and undone is all credit to God's care and provision. It's a picture of what it's like to have God's love and goodness to go with you through life. It means that when you pray, Lord, I need your help, you're not rubbing the side of a lamp and hoping a genie pops out, but you're tapping into, living into the relationship that God himself offers you. As a companion, as a sojourner, as your God with you. It's so comforting. And although the language of the psalmist here is pretty temporal and it's really limited in kind of imagination to the day-to-day activity of the psalmist, if we remember our childhood prayers of, Lord, lay me down at night, if I wake, right? Like that God's attentiveness and protection goes through the night as well. That it's around-the-clock care. For he is the God who protects and provides and pursues. Does Jesus not do all the same things throughout his ministry? Is it not, like Mark says, that the compassion that we see in the Father, do we not also see it in the Son? If you read the Gospel of Mark, which, if you'll remember previous sermons that we've recorded and shared with you, it has an incredible pace to the ministry that Christ set. That it begins with the come, follow me, and I will send you out. And then the rest of it is Jesus leading his disciples through the Galilean area and beyond, and them really struggling to keep up, not only in their minds and in their hearts, but I think sometimes with their feet as well, as we see on Good Friday in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Christ is praying and the disciples are sleeping. Come, follow me, and I will send you out. Jesus teaches in the synagogues, and he casts out demons, and he preaches in such a way and teaches the scripture in such a way that people are amazed at what it says. He heals Simon's mother-in-law. He teaches his disciples to stay on topic and don't get distracted by the crowds, but let's keep moving. Let's not stop and stay lost in the crowds, but we have to get to that next town on the edge of things and make sure that they too know the good news that I have come to bring them. He shared meals with the rejected and the lost. He forgave the sins of those who were deemed uncleansable. And he encouraged his disciples to trust that God would watch over them. There's a lot of moments in which the disciples, too, like this psalm that we read, challenges us to trust in God. There's evidence in chapter 2 of Mark's Gospel where there's change happening and there's an expectation to trust that the new things that God is doing are okay. There's an invitation a couple chapters later that we are to trust even in the smallest measures of faith, that God can move mountains. Again, the disciples are told to trust that even the smallest offerings we bring him will be enough to provide for the multitudes. There's a couple moments where it's a few loaves and a couple of fish that are spread and shared with thousands. Again, trusting in God's generosity to provide, to use your generosity to provide. And then after Jesus reveals to his disciples the horrors are what is going to take place in Jerusalem and the reality that he will not be with them in person always, he challenges them to then take courage. They will be okay, for God himself is with them. I think all of this finds its sort of highlight and sort of fullness in the prayer that Jesus offers in John chapter 17. We know it as the high priestly prayer. I joke that it's the Abbott and Costello prayer, that it's like, God, as I pray that you're in me as I'm in you and you're in them, and then it's like, who's on first and what's on second? But it's this incredible prayer in which in which Christ asks that God's plan for us is the fullness of his love and mercy. That we are together one in him. That we do life, all of life, together with him. That his goodness and his love follows us for the rest of our days, so that we might dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So while the psalmist might imagine the moments of God's care for our day-to-day living, it's in the fulfillment of the person of Christ and the incarnational presence of God in our lives that we hear and see this reality translated to the scope of eternity. That our dwelling in God's presence is for all time and for people in all places. God's will is not simply that we manage our day-to-day, but that we are in him in such a way that we will always be in him. And so Psalm 23, especially verse 6, invites us in the context of resurrection hope to celebrate God's love and the extent that it has to change our lives forever. Not only does it have the power to give you hope in the moment of despair as you go through your life today, but it gives you hope in the despairing thoughts of what happens after death. To know that your life and your person is secure in the person who has always protected you and provided for you. And that in that provision, just as Christ died and rose again, you too might live for eternity in his presence with those who have gone before in the faith. So we arrive here at Easter, having witnessed the lengths that God will go, and now are asked again to remember that God's faithfulness and love will pursue you each and every day unto eternity. And then all I can say to you is that you are loved. And that I hope and pray through the grace of God and the work of His Spirit in your life that you find Him every day in His presence with those who worship and are encouraged in the faith also, so that you might grow in His goodness and love. For we experience His love through the hands and the feet of others around us. And so in knowing Him and knowing that you are loved means that you do, in fact, love others. In knowing Him, you know that you can't outrun Him and He is pursuing you. That you know Him and then know that you'll always be found even in the moments that you are lost, and that in knowing Him, you know that you're always secure even when it seems that you're going to lose everything in life today. You know in your bones that you are okay, because God will never leave you or forsake you. His goodness and His love will pursue you no matter where life takes you, even if it leads you into death and then into everlasting life in His presence forever. God is with you. May the love of God and the hope of the resurrection of Jesus Christ give shape to the way that you live your life, so that you do so full of confidence and trust in Him. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord turn His face towards you and be gracious to you. May He look upon you and give you peace, now and always. Amen.